Good afternoon, everybody. This is DMGeezerjim sitting here running up a YouTube recording for today. Wanted to change speeds a little bit and kind of talk about a little bit more holistic guide type of a thing. I surf a lot of the D&D Facebook pages, Discords, Reddits, and stuff. And one of the things I see pop up a lot is, how do I be a dungeon master? Can I be a dungeon master? Should I be a dungeon master? And it's a deep, thick question. So I wanted to run a series of videos where we're going to talk about my opinion on what it is to be a dungeon master, how to be a dungeon master, how to be effective, and the different types of dungeon mastering there is. It's not just one dungeon master fits all sizes, and we'll get into that as we go through some details. But yeah, DM Geezer Jim here, and let's dig into it. Dungeon Mastering 101, or I guess we'd say 091, because I'm just kidding. 1301. Yeah, that's right. 1301. My bad. First and foremost, the dungeon master wears a lot of different hats. There's a lot of concepts of what we do. It ranges from as far as you're just a community organizer trying to herd cats to you get to play God. And yes to both, but the truth is somewhere in the middle. Basically, just to put it in the simplest context as possible, a dungeon master is the person that is responsible for coordinating the group, administering the rules, and moving the story along as you play Dungeons and Dragons. That's it. Couple parts that go to every dungeon master's game: the group, the adventure. Okay, and there's a couple things that go into that. Let's focus on kind of the first thing is understanding where you're coming from as a dungeon master. Are you wanting to sit down with a group of friends and family and play an epic 5-year-long campaign of 100+ sessions of gameplay? Or are you just wanting to dabble and do, I just want to do a one shot. I just want to start out and I don't know what I want to do yet. I want to give it a try. And that's a legitimate answer as well. So understanding where you're coming from is going to be the key to understanding your next steps. But my personal opinion, first and foremost, the thing that you need to focus on more than anything is knowledge and your players. Okay, players being the paramount thing. As long as you are investing in your players as people, you're going to have a lot more success. The pressure is going to be off of you. Mistakes are going to happen, and everything's cool because you're playing a game with friends. You're playing a game. Or never forget, Dungeons and Dragons is a game. We should be doing this to laugh, ha ha, he he, have fun, high fives, and get on with our days. It goes a little bit deeper than that in regards to you can have chats during the week in between your sessions, and some people even get into off-session role play where they build the story as they go. You can take it to great depths, but first and foremost, oh man, I missed a hair, sorry. First and foremost, it's a game, and you're part of the game table as a dungeon master. You're not above it. You're sitting at the table with an equal voice. A lot of people say you're the most important person at the table. That's debatable. True, if you don't have a dungeon master, you don't have a game. But if you don't have players, you don't have a game either. See how that works? It's an interchange. There's a balance of power, and I strongly encourage and recommend any new dungeon master as you're getting into it to remember you're not above your players. You're sitting at the table equal to your players when it comes time to run D&D as people. Okay, now when we get into the actual mechanics, obviously things are going to change a little bit, but when you place focus on the front part, that you're investing in each other as a group of friends, family, online strangers, whatever, but we're here to collaborate and have fun, you start out with a semblance of, you start out with a basis of mutual respect. We're all starting out day one to have a good time together while we play this game. I get to be the guy that makes sure it keeps moving. I get to be the guy that makes sure to prepare the story and I'm the guy that has to educate any rule disruptions. So that's my job at the table as a dungeon master. Now, if you're investing in your players, if you're investing in the people, if you guys are having conversations away from the table, having fun with each other, joking around with memes, you know, hanging out and not playing D&D but still having a good time, you've got a great basis. You've got a wonderful basis for Dungeons and Dragons. But guess what? There's groups of players that show up every week, strangers called, you know, to the events called in the Adventure League. The Dungeon Master is there. They're going to vary each week. The group play is going to vary each week. So, you know, that's okay too. It's a little bit different, but everyone comes in that short period of time, in that 4-hour period. I'm here to play Dungeons and Dragons, and this is my group. So there's still a modicum of respect because the expectations are, while they're slightly different, they're still the same. We want to get together, play this game, and have fun. So this is me kind of lecturing to start everything off, and apologies for that. If you're a dungeon master that expects to control every movement of your group, you're wanting to use your players to tell your story, go write a book. Go write a book. Players are people. They're going to have their own motivations. They're going to have their ideas. They're not your playing pieces. They're not your tokens that get to have their own voices as you move them around your map, building your plot, telling your story. It's a collaborative thing. It's our story. It's a shared experience. So if that's your goal, save yourself some frustration, save yourself some frustrated players, and you know, turn off my video now and go write a book. Because I mean, you're gonna, I swear to God, you're gonna be way more satisfied with that. You're gonna have full control over the story rather than depending on 4 strangers or even 4 friends to synergize perfectly with what's in your mind's eye. So you have to be flexible when you're a storyteller coming into Dungeons and Dragons. Your story, your plot, your hooks are not going to survive first contact with your party's actions. Remember, players, DM, all of us together, collaborating to tell a story. You can't tell the players what to say. You shouldn't tell the players what to say. You shouldn't tell the players what they have to do. You shouldn't tell the players where to go. As a rule, because then you're basically, they're just sitting there watching you play solo Dungeons and Dragons with their character. No one's signing up for that. So you got to let go. You can't go into being a dungeon master thinking, I've got this great story, I've got the next Game of Thrones, and my people are going to play through it. You're going to be disappointed. You're going to be disappointed. It is what it is. Understand that everyone is here for their own motivations and reasons. And when you invest in the people, you get some insight as a dungeon master to what interests them and what doesn't, so you can better tailor the experience to fit their expectations and desires, which moves the story along, which makes it fun for a dungeon master. Okay, so investing in the people is paramount. Get to know your players. Make sure your players are interacting with each other as well. There's a lot of stuff on table etiquette. There's a lot of little this and that's that we'll get into in future series. But like I said, I just wanted to start out this first one and kind of give a holistic view. Now, I apologize. I should have done this before I started. Who am I? What gives me the authority to talk about how to be a dungeon master, even though my channel name says DMGeezerjim? Who the hell do I think I am? Fair, valid question. I'm just another schmuck on the internet talking right now. And I thank you for clicking on my video so far to listen to it. Now, I've been playing since 1983. I received the basic set and Advanced Dungeons and Dragons in the same gift Christmas bundle from my dad. So I grew up in Dungeons and Dragons kind of broken, as in I was learning to take some of the cool stuff out of basic and work it in with advanced. But starting in 1983, going all the way to, I guess, 98, 99, when we were switching more into Cyberpunk 2020 and Magic the Gathering and all that kind of shit. But who am I now? You know, so I guess that's accounting for about 16 years worth of Dungeons and Dragons experience. I'm actually currently dungeon mastering 4 separate campaigns, playing in a 5th each week. I DM 3 nights a week and then play a 4th night. Running 1 Greyhawk centered campaign, 2 Forgotten Realms centered campaigns, and a Planescape campaign. And I'm also playing in the Sword Coast campaign. I am a big believer, after being a Luddite for so long. I mean, if you look over my shoulder, you can see some shelves and tables. I've got notepads and graph paper, Spyro notebooks, and index cards out the yin-yang. And I've readily embraced the digital revolution. I love D&D Beyond. I have the full collection of manuals on D&D Beyond shared with my campaign group. So we have all the literature. In addition to that, I've been rebuilding my old collections up. Hold on a second. Probably, I think right now we're sitting at 14 gigabytes worth of PDFs from across BECME all the way into 4th edition. Here's my big ass classic Greyhawk models. So I've got everything broken down by setting, broken down Planescape, Waterdeep stuff, Mystara content, Ravenloft, blah, 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 blah. So I got a lot of content. And number two, as you're probably seeing when you look at the screen, I'm an old dude, which means I grew up having to read this stuff. So first and foremost, I enjoy reading. I enjoy getting into the content, digging deeply into it. I have a lot of the content. I've read the vast majority of it from beginner up through 4th edition and including 5th edition. So I'm speaking with some authority in regards to book knowledge. I'm speaking with a little practical authority in regards to my expertise and my practice as a dungeon master. But that's it. Outside of that, that's all I got. I am an aspiring content creator. I've written some adventures published over on DM's Guild. I've got a bunch of maps over on Etsy, some player stuff, some handouts over on Patreon and all that that I share. So I'm working on becoming a published author as well as a VTT map maker and counter designer, all that kind of stuff. So, I am kind of coming in from a point of at least knowledge. So I don't want to use the word authority. I'm not anyone in particular, just a guy who's willing to sit here and talk to you about being a dungeon master and what it takes. So now we got all that crap out of the way. Now that I may be blowing steam, but I'm blowing steam based on a stack of books this thick. Let's get started. You've decided that you want a dungeon master. A few things that you need to understand. Number one, your group. Get to know your people, get to know your players. It may even come as far as coming up with some sort of a survey or questionnaire, especially if you got players that have never touched D&D before. When you're getting ready to set up your session 0, let me pause here. Session 0 is a gathering of the players before they've made their characters and the dungeon master to have a discussion about Dungeons and Dragons. What do you know about the game? What are you looking forward to? What are you thinking about playing? This is the event. As a DM, I'm going to pose, this is the adventure setting that I'm talking about, thinking about running. These are the adventures that are comprised of it. We'll talk about that in more detail, but this is, at the session 0, that's my job to come in as the dungeon master, reinforce any rules. We're playing rule as written, 5th edition, wherever possible, with some exceptions on homebrew. I want to let everyone that uses a two-handed sword dual wield them, for example. I know that's being stupid, that's being silly, but doesn't matter. That's where you're setting out the expectations for the group to learn. You have to have your plan together before session 0. Session 0 isn't where you want to sit down and make your plan. Session 0 is where you tailor your plan to your party. Before you sit down at session 0, you should have an idea of what are you going to run. Is it going to be a short adventure? Is it going to be a campaign? Both of those will involve the setting. The short adventure setting isn't as important. Campaign setting is huge. How many people are you willing to play with? Are you willing to adjust for 2, 3, 4? What are the rules you're planning on administering at your table as a dungeon master? If you're a brand new DM, that's probably going to be 5th edition basic rules. And here's the caveat. Express to your players that they have the responsibility to understand the rules as well. A lot of DMs get hung up and honestly beat down because they're playing with players and the players are never given the responsibility to know the game. It's like it's always up to the DM to make every rule adjustment. Look here, push that button now. No. This is where you set the expectations early and often that your players are obligated to know how to operate their character. Give them agency in the campaign. Give them responsibility. They're going to care more about it. A lot of times we're in a real big hurry to get playing D&D. You know what? Just that's okay. I'll make some characters. I'll help you guys do it and da-da-da. And if it's just like a tutorial, I'm teaching people how to play Dungeons and Dragons the first time and that's it, that's okay. But somewhere in the next step has to be the requirement for your player to have agency. Whether it's 1 player or 5 player, it doesn't matter. The people that are part of your play group, they need to know how to play their character. They don't need to have every spell memorized, but they need to understand initiative. They need to understand basic bonus action versus regular action versus reaction. You need to understand all of this stuff way at the bare minimum. You're the guy that educates. You're the person that educates the rules. So you're obligated to, before you sit down at session 0, understand the rules of the game. That doesn't mean memorizing everything. Um, we'll dip into that real quick. So you might have to rewind and go back and forth in this video. I apologize. They'll get a little more tighter and more concise. Like I said, we're starting holistically at this point. I'll go into some specifics, specific videos tailored to specific things, as we go deeper into the series. But you need to know action economy. What's an action? What's a bonus action? What's a reaction? How do opportunity attacks work? How does movement work? Difficult terrain impacts that. The basics that are going to happen in every single combat, you need to understand that before you sit down at the table. You don't have to master them, but you need to be confident that you know this, okay? That's the first thing. Your group's going to feed off of your confidence, or they're going to feed off of the lack of confidence. So to keep the game moving smoothly, to keep the flow of the game going well, being confident in the rules, being confident in your presentation is a big thing. It only grows with time. It only grows with repetition. So just relax on that. Oh my gosh, I'm not sure what I'm going to do. I can't ever DM. Okay, this is going to be an unpopular take. What do they call that? A bad opinion, but maybe not the best way to state it. But relax. You're already confident. If you're thinking about being a dungeon master, you've got a little bit of an ego already because you want to run a world. You want to let your people into your head, your players, your friends. You want to share your headspace with them as a dungeon master. That's kind of what we're doing. We're imagining this stuff and we're describing this stuff. Through our descriptions, our players get to engage in the world. Through us, the dungeon master, our players experience the world. Okay? So you got to have a little bit of confidence and ego to start with. If you've already said, I want to be a dungeon master, you're good. If you're sitting on the fence about it, it comes with time. It really comes with time. But, you've got to be willing to understand that you're working from that point. There is a little bit of ego involved in being a DM. There's no denying that. Anyone that says, I have no ego, they're lying to you. You have to have a little bit of one to want to invent worlds in your brain, y'all. So relax with that, We've gotten that step out of the way. We sat down. We're getting our session 0 going on. Prior to session 0, you need to understand the basics of the game. You need to understand turn order, movement, combat. What modifiers mean what. And I'll do a in-depth review on a stat block. We'll simulate a combat and do all that kind of stuff as we go through this series. So be patient. Like I said, this is our intro to. This is our first little chat on DMing. So once you've got an understanding and the grasp of the basics, you've got an understanding of what you're wanting to run. Lost Mines of Phandalin, I know people beat it to death, but it is beat to death for a reason. It's a well-structured starting adventure. We'll take that sucker apart page by page, piece by piece during this session, during this tutorial, during the series, I should say, and go through and Lost Mines and help you guys learn how to prep it. Maybe we'll take some parts and I'll find some holes in it and just forewarn you, hey, you need to be aware of this, prepare for that, etc., etc. Read it numerous times, played it a couple times, looking for, that'll be a nice, easy starting point. And number 2, it's free for anyone that signs up on D&D Beyond. If you're interested in getting into Dungeons & Dragons, you can download the basic rules for free. You can download Lost Mines of Phandalin for free off of D&D Beyond. No money changing hands, no nothing. You can be playing tomorrow for free. Well, hypothetically, you can be as soon as you're ready to play. So, that's where our focus will be when we go into demo mode. So, questions for you as a dungeon master. These, obviously we're talking, so these are questions for you in your head. Are you wanting to build and plan a gigantic world? Or are you wanting to improvise and shoot off of the hip? You plan on having a massive continental map filled out with, mountain ranges and geographically accurate river flows and temperature zones and weather zones and all of that kind of shit? Or are you going to use a Forgotten Realms map? There is no right or wrong answer, but these are things that you need to be thinking of, okay? And I might say extremes in between. Or are you going to be the guy that draws an in and then draws out from the in and continues to build the world outwards from where your party started based on their decisions? No right or wrong with any of those. We'll talk about that during the campaign and world building chunk of the series there. But these are things that are in fact part of being a dungeon master. You don't have to have the answer tomorrow. You don't even have to have the answer, well, you have to have the answer by the first session what you're wanting to run so you can at least plan appropriately. But, you can easily meld a single one-shot adventure into a short adventure into a campaign. And there's no law on the books, there's no rule in Dungeons and Dragons that says you have to finish a campaign if no one's having fun. You can kill the son of a bitch right off and start off with a new adventure. You can start off with whatever you want. Two little misconceptions there, put them out of the way now. Both ideas are interchangeable. Both ideas they're not mutually exclusive. But at least you know where you're starting from, okay? Know the rules, know your plan for your adventure, and get to know your players. Spend some time in the background. Don't try to lead the conversation during your session 0. Say your piece and kind of check out. I don't necessarily say, okay, I'm going away, but let your players start leading the conversation. Let them engage each other. Because again, if you have to prompt everything all the time, number one, it's going to drag the pace of the game down. Number two, you're preventing your players from connecting. So you can't necessarily. I mean, it's like that Adrian Brower meme. I distinctly remember telling you everyone to RP while I was gone and have fun. I don't see that happening right now. I mean, that's kind of one of those things. If you don't let the players establish a rapport as people, it's difficult to maintain the rapport when they're being their when they're being their fantasy character. It starts with having, we are all about to embark on 3 to 5 hours times however many sessions that you're going to play of pretending to be other people. There has to exist a level of trust amongst you and your players, and amongst your players and themselves, to be vulnerable enough to each other to pretend to be somebody else without the fear of someone laughing at, oh my God, your voice is dumb. That's not cool. It's like the human nature, especially when someone does a really silly voice. But is it, oh my God, are they laughing because I nailed it, or are they laughing because I'm goofy? That confidence thing. When you're investing in each other as people, when you're investing in each other and forming the beginnings of friendships, a lot of that tension goes away. A lot of that mystery goes away. So make sure that you're investing in your players to the point where you're building trust, you're building camaraderie, you're allowing each other to be vulnerable in a shared space to pretend to be something that they're not. So for some people that's big, so that's what you're maintaining. That's the environment that you're trying to foster as a dungeon master. When you're sitting down with your group, when you guys are about ready to sit down and start playing D&D, and some people jump straight into it and they're great with it. Some people are a little bit tentative. I'm not sure how to role play. I'm afraid to role play. That's our job, your job and my job, to make sure that both of those people have the same enjoyment at the table, have the same value at the table, and have the same comfort at the table. That's when managing personalities becomes a thing. We'll dig into that here in a little, in one of the other as we go deeper in. So, as you're hearing me say, it's like next session, next follow deeper in the series. There's a lot of stuff that goes into being a dungeon master. I know a lot of times we're really cavalier when we're talking to our friend. Ah, you could do it. Ah, man, anyone could be a DM. It's true. Anyone could be a DM, and you could do it. And most people are way better at dungeon mastering than they give themselves credit for. But there is a lot of work. I mean, there's no denying that. Even your lazy DM, there's a series out there, XYZ's Guide to Lazy DMing. You're still reading a bunch of books. You're still spending some time setting up some random tables so you can be lazy. Even the laziest dungeon master is spending more time preparing for their game than their players. So you're understanding right now, as a dungeon master, you're making the extra commitment. If you don't care about that, if you're not really necessarily worried about, I'm not worried about my party because I'm building a story, you're not going to have a game very long. Okay? So you're preparing for the group, you're preparing for the game, you're preparing for the sessions, and you're preparing strategically for 10 sessions from now. You're preparing tactically for 5 minutes into the session. There's a lot of layers to the setup, to the preparation. Anyone that says, oh, I just make it up as I go along, I bet you they don't make it up as nearly as much as they're going to tell you they are. They probably got a dozen or so ideas running around in their head, and when an opportunity presents itself through gameplay, plop, that idea goes on the table. Oh, I'm just making it up as going. You're lying. It's okay. It's okay to say that. You know, that means you got an active imagination. That means you got a head full of content that you can just plop on the table. You already did your prep because you read 1,000 hours prior to ever playing Dungeons and Dragons. You've still prepped. Which leads me to kind of my next thing, and we'll get more into this in the campaign and strategy, campaign and tactical world building and all of those segments. Be okay with cribbing from pop culture. Be okay with making references to scenes from a movie or to songs or to anything that can help bring the moment into focus. I know a lot of players, a lot of DMs, not so much anymore, but it used to be verboten. Oh, why you always be breaking the fourth wall, man? Why can't you keep us immersed? Nowadays, because number one, no one's reading J.R.R. Tolkien to add, at great lengths. No one's getting into the Dragonlance. A lot of the books reading that existed back when we didn't have anything better to do. Shit, come on, y'all. Let's be honest. But point being, the content that we have in our head is there. You gotta be okay with reading. You gotta be okay with preparing for it. And even if you're playing lazy ad hoc improv DM, you've still done some preparation. So when you're using pop culture references, what I'm talking about with that's another kind of preparation in a roundabout way. You're able to engage your party faster in the moment at the table, in some instances by making a reference to that scene from that movie when. What I'm referring to is where you're verbalizing a scene. You're describing a scene where they're walking down. Let me think of something that everyone has seen. You're walking through a narrow, craggy stone ravine canyon. There's large pinnacles of rock and twisted black trees hithering to and fro. As the canyon gets to the end, it seems to widen out into a large bowl with a dark crevice at the end of it. Kind of like that scene from Return of the King when Aragorn and Gimli and instantly your party's there. They're no longer trying to see it in their mind's eye because they see it. Now, the disadvantage there is, yes, you are using someone else's works and words to describe a scene, but the advantage is that's that much less brain power that's that much less time that your players have to use to go from being a character to a person comprehending the scene back to their character. Because the moment you make that connection, they go from being the person back into that character. That's what I refer to as far as helping. Even though you're breaking immersion for that moment, you're helping them much longer with immersion. Everyone at the table their mind's eye is set on what you've described. They're there, they're feeling it, they're smelling it, they're hearing it, and they're in. You don't have, okay, can you describe that again? Coming from the left, coming from the right. So don't be afraid of using pop culture references. Don't be afraid of using symbology and even describing scenes from popular movies to bring your players to the table a lot quicker. I'm not necessarily saying you do that in every way all the time, but it is it's a valid technique. Okay, storytelling techniques will develop with time, and that's the other thing I want. I don't want to run any of these too much longer because who wants to listen to me talk for more than 30 or 40 minutes at a stretch? But I do want to close this, this intro to dungeon mastering out with kind of a last little bit of summary. Promise you there'll be more stuff coming in the series as we go. You're responsible for administering the rules to make sure that everyone at the table has a good time playing a game. You're responsible as a dungeon master to present a setting and prevent an environment that the game takes place in that your players can engage with. You're responsible for helping structure the story as the collaborative group moves it along. You're responsible for knowing the flow of the game and knowing the rules well enough to keep the game going and well enough to educate any rule disruptions. Okay? That's really it. That's what you need to know as a dungeon master. More than that, you need to invest in your players. When you sit down at a table, if you're doing a long-term campaign, especially when you're early on, make sure the players understand that they're an equal part of the table. No one here is greater or less than the others. This game is not happening except for the fact that everyone at the table is here right now. Take their feedback. Make sure that they're engaged. Focus on what they have fun with so you can tailor your adventures more to that to draw your party in more. You are not here to tell a story using the players as your actors and as your game pieces. You are here to build a collaborative story and build a collaborative world. Even if, well, let me rephrase that. You're here to build a collaborative story in whatever world you guys settle on. Whether that's your homebrew world, whether that's a published setting, doesn't matter. That's decided on each individual basis. But you're responsible for building a collaborative story. You're not responsible for writing a story for your players to go. We're directors. We're not writers. We're not even directors. We're producers. We don't tell our people where to stand. We don't tell our people what to say. We didn't write the dialogue out for them. We build the sets. We bring in the extras. We change the color of the sky. We throw the smell of the smoldering smithy and the iron and the coal smoke into the air in the background. We put the muddy puddles in the road for our players to hop over. We have the kids running by chasing a dog. We are the producers. We produce the world for our players to interact with. When our players are well immersed in a world, they interact with it more, and they themselves will drive the story for you. Okay? You're not a writer, you're not a director, you're a producer. Lastly, you are not responsible for knowing every rule ever written. Nobody knows every rule ever written in 5th edition. Nobody. Much less adding extra editions on top of that. Let go. Take a breath and absolve yourself of the responsibility of thinking you have to know everything, because you don't. You don't. No one does. No one's ever has. Back in the day, it was passing the DM's guide and the player's handbook back and forth across the table. Now it's Google. It's either way, we're still looking stuff up. Even to this day, as a dungeon master who's running 4 campaigns, I've been doing 5th edition for, I guess, about 3 years now. There's not a session where I don't look something up just to verify on something, just to make sure that it's right, just to make sure that it's going okay. Thank God for D&D Beyond and Google, right? But, if you're sitting at the table, you might have to dig through the book real quick and look it up. It's okay. You are not responsible for memorizing everything in front of you. You're not responsible for doing anything more than knowing enough to keep the game going. One of the fun things I tell new DMs, it's like, think of yourself as the amateur piano player. You just need to know the next lesson, and you'll learn together. All you need to do is be a step ahead of your players when you first start getting into dungeon mastering, just enough to make sure that you're confidently in control of the situation, that you can confidently educate on on some rules, and then you go on to the next step and you learn together. So it's all a process, and that's really what I want to close up with. You're going to have great sessions. You're going to have flat sessions. You're going to have wonderful sessions. You're going to have sessions that devolve into rule lawyer arguments. If you're playing with a plethora of people, you're going to experience the highs and lows of D&D. That's part of it. Be flexible, be relaxed, and understand the only thing that will make anyone a better dungeon master is repetition. Making sure to give yourself the opportunity to keep playing. And that's it. That's it. There's no magic bullet. There's no secret formula to being a dungeon master other than just doing it in repetition. Now, there's some guidelines that we can provide, and moving into the series, we'll do that. Like I said, this is just kind of an intro to me, a holistic view. What do you look at? What do I tell people? And that's what I'm doing. This is what you need to start thinking about if you want to be a dungeon master. We're starting out at a holistic strategic point of view, focusing on your people, focusing on your players, focusing on the amount of knowledge you need to start. So, in closing, hey, thanks for listening in on the chat here. Hopefully I didn't scare you away from being a dungeon master. Hopefully, if you're a dungeon master, if you follow the series and you're DM, I'd love to hear back from you in the comments. I'd love to, for you guys to build up a conversation as this goes along. Because this is, at the end of the day, my opinion. My opinion as a longtime D&D veteran and a current dungeon master. I've got a library of content that I read. But at the end of the day, it's just an opinion. Because there's no right way to do D&D. There's no one right way to do Dungeons and Dragons. That's a better way to say it. So put your DM hat on, sit back, do a little bit of reading, do a little bit of thinking. Think about tomorrow and think about a year from now, hypothetically speaking. Read, or listen to podcasts, or watch videos. Absorb knowledge, absorb content, whether it's flavor content as far as scenery and monsters and all that, or it's rules content as far as mechanics. There's a plethora of sources that are out there, print, audio, video, and all. There's no shortage of information for how to be a dungeon master. Only thing you got to do is decide that you want to do it and invest in your play group as equals, and you're well on your way. You take those 2 steps, everything else is going to be cake, because you're starting at a point of mutual respect, you're starting at a point of collaboration, and you're starting at a point of we're doing this together to have fun. So as long as you're starting with those mentalities, everything else is downhill, man. Everything else is just plus. Everything else is in addition to. You get those requirements out the way, you're in business. Invest in your people, and everything else goes well from there. Especially as a new dungeon master. But hey, DMGeezerjim here. Like I said, I'm gonna go ahead and finish up this recording real quick. This was just an intro to the whole playlist. There's probably, I don't even know how many videos are gonna be here. Like I said, real briefly, I'm going to go through, talk about combat, how to manage a combat encounter. We'll bust open a stat block, talk about what do these numbers mean? How do they go up? How do they go down? We'll talk about world building, campaign settings. What is a setting? How big do they need to be? The ones that are in existence, how to use them. We're going to talk about, rules lawyering, how to deal with educating a rules disruption, where to go for rules, things like that. We'll talk about, actual combat encounter. I'll run a mock combat encounter, for example. We'll throw up a VTT and have some fun. I have a lot of plans for this series, and hopefully I'm able to help a few people that are questioning if they want to be dungeon masters take the next step and become dungeon masters, because there's not enough of us out here, guys. I'm running 4 campaigns playing in one. I've got a play group of 28 people. If I was to ask if anyone else wanted to play tomorrow, I'd get another yes. So, there's a lot of people out there that want to play D&D. There's not as many dungeon masters as need to be. Help fill in. Help spread the love for D&D. Take up the mantle of a DM. Bring some new people in. Send some disciples out forth. I know this is sounding really like cultist, isn't it? I apologize for that last remark. However, that's how it works, man. If people don't get an opportunity to play, the hobby dies. If you're willing to take up the mantle and be a dungeon master and help spread the love for the hobby, that's an awesome thing, man. And I salute you for doing that. And I'm here just to provide as much aid as I can as we go through this journey together. But you know what? If you guys want to catch me live, catch some face-to-face chats, I'm over on Twitch 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Central Standard Time. Same handle, DMGeezerjim. A lot more videos will be coming in this series. So thank you. Whether you've been here for 5 minutes, whether you've been here for the whole time. Appreciate you sharing your time with me. If you want to support us in our endeavors, obviously like and subscribe to the channel that you're watching it on here on YouTube. Hit me up over on my Patreon. Throw a few bucks over there. Help support us over there. I make sure that there's some VTT maps and a couple adventure aids. You're going to get a few items a month for your $5 donation. You're going to know that you're supporting us as far as continuing these projects. But DMGeezerjim here, signing out, and we will talk to you soon about DM and about how to be a dungeon master and what do I need to know and how to do it. So this can be a fun series. Looking forward to it, and hopefully we'll get a little bit cleaner, a little bit more focused as we break it into manageable parts. But you guys be safe out there, and we'll see you soon.